And Jesus himself said that he did not come to do away with the law.
He does not take us out of this world if he does not want us to be contaminated by it.
This is the Adventist Pilgrimage Podcast with your hosts, Michael Campbell and Greg Howell.
All right, this is Michael Campbell. Welcome to the Adventist Pilgrimage Podcast. And we are excited because today I'm on the campus of Pacific Union College, and I'm with my friend, Professor Dr. Jim Wibberding. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here.
And I was excited because I'm here for another meeting and stuff, but stopped by to say hi, and I knew it was coming. But discovered that on your kitchen table this morning, a really fantastic book, Walking with the Pioneers. I have to make sure I get this title just right. The Captivating Story of West Coast Adventism, 1859 to 1909. I knew it was in the works, but now to see it in print, how's it feel?
Yeah, it feels good. It's been one of those projects that I have been at for a little while,
right,
here and there, and so it's neat to see it come together and see the story told.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the story behind the story of this book. I know you teach Adventist history. You're actually very passionate about teaching a class on women in Adventist history. So you've been interested in this for some time. Yeah. In fact, I think we've even gone to see a few heritage sites over the years out here in the West Coast. So tell us about the book. How did this come about?
Yeah, so it came about, I suppose the larger backstory is that everywhere I've ever been, I have explored the Adventist history of the local scene. And I always find interesting connections. And so when I came to PUC in 2017, I did the same thing and we made some interesting discoveries, found the grave of Merritt Kellogg, which we've talked about before.
Yeah, previous one of our previous episodes. So, and I noticed that's featured in the book.
It is. And so some of that just was out there. I published some things, and Dale Galusha of Pacific Press called me and asked me if I would write something on Adventist historical places in the area.
Yeah.
And what I developed was really more of the West Coast story along with some of those places. So there's tour guide notes at the end of each chapter and a little bit of instruction on how to get to those places. Yeah. But for me, it's really about telling the story. Yeah. And it's part of our Adventist story that really hasn't been told broadly. Here and there a little bit. In the 1940s, Harold Macomber put together a book, Pioneering the Message in the Golden West.
Yeah, it's hard to get a copy of that now.
It is, but there's just so much more to tell also.
Interesting. So kind of a curiosity, you've been teaching here. There's some heritage sites right here in your backyard.
Oh, yes.
So
quite a few.
So tell us, obviously, if you get this book, thank you, Dale, for making sure this book happens. So if you're listening, that's kudos to you. I love all the creative stuff coming out of Pacific Press. But I just want to say that here is a great resource. Oftentimes we focus on Adventist history in New England, and that's an important part of the story, right? I mean, there's some amazing stories that need to be told, but there's also amazing stories that need to be told here.
Yes, you're right. The narratives have been dominated by New England and Michigan, and I think it was my wife who teaches Adventist heritage here at PUC who first...
Kudos to Laura.
Yes, Laura. She first dubbed this the second founding of Adventism, institutional founding.
All right, I like that.
And I think it's accurate.
Okay.
Because what we have is in 1859, Merritt Kellogg.
I heard that name before.
The oldest brother of the group. So John Harvey's a little brother.
Younger half-brother, right?
Yes. Yeah. Will Keith, the serial king, is also a half-brother.
So this is Big Brother comes out to the West Coast.
Yes, 1859. And it's just it's an economic interest.
Okay.
He's poor and he needs work.
Right.
So
he goes like on a wagon or something, right? I mean, didn't you find some of that story too?
Yeah, ox cart.
Yeah.
There were several modes across. Most of it was ox cart. And before he left Jackson, Michigan, he bought two new pairs of shoes. Yeah. Which unfortunately were fastened on with wooden pegs.
Oh, no.
And so he found himself walking barefoot.
Terrible.
As those pegs came out and the shoes fell apart, he found himself walking barefoot. He said hundreds of miles across beside the wagon. Anyway, he gets out here, and an interesting phenomenon develops, because when you take a core set of beliefs and you drop them into a culture that prizes tradition a little bit more, in Michigan or New England, and you take that same set of beliefs and you drop them into a place where it's chock full of pioneers, people who went west until they couldn't anymore.
Right.
They love to explore. There's
Yeah.
a certain missional restlessness that emerges. And 1859 is a year before we chose our name, Seventh-day Adventist. The organizational debate in 1861 is yet to come. And it's in this context of kind of an unstructured movement in many ways that Adventism develops independently of the Adventism in Battle Creek. And it's the same Adventism, sort of.
Yeah.
But it has a different DNA,
Yeah.
and especially on the missional side. It's very creative.
Yeah. So it's almost like this kind of organic kind of, I don't know how to put it, but it kind of this creative DNA here on the West Coast that like Laura said, this refounding of Adventism, and that still, I mean, has a significant impact on Adventism on the West Coast, doesn't it? I mean, there's a certain culture, right, that you just feel, a vibe, you know? Yeah.
And I don't know, you would be the expert on this, Michael, but if we were to look at why the Battle Creek narratives and the New England narratives became prominent, I think it might have something to do with fundamentalism and kind of locking down a single narrative. We're all in the box. And so West Coast Adventism, in my perception, developed a little bit of an inferiority complex.
Right.
And perhaps that's why we haven't told our story as broadly.
Interesting.
But it's a huge part of the entire Adventist story. And it's a lovely part.
Yeah.
There's the missional restlessness, there's the creativity. We established out here those three main structures, publishing, education, healthcare.
Sure.
But each
Which
of them,
are some of the sites you feature in your book.
Yes, thanks for going back to the book. I appreciate that. But, those, they had a different vibe.
Yeah.
It's from the press and the college out here that we get Jones and Wagner.
Oh.
Right?
Jones and Wags.
Yeah, theological innovation. You have also 1881 is the resolution to ordain women at the General Conference. And 1882 is when the college starts here.
Wow.
And we trained a large number of women.
And that's all happening on the West Coast again, right?
Yeah. Large number of women for ministry.
So kind of this progressive wave of Adventism, if you please, in the best sense of the term, right? I mean, that this is kind of innovative, and how do we do mission? And obviously what works maybe in traditional New England may not work on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think that you describe it really well, thinking of it in those terms, because you have, there is that missional restlessness, and it leads to things. There are the innovations such as Jones and Wagner, there's religious liberty, there's the missionary ship.
A lot of stuff going on.
The Pitcairn emerges, and it just keeps going.
Wow.
So yes, in the book, going back to the book, I feature a number of the places where these developments occurred.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me, what's your favorite place you featured in the book?
Favorite place?
If you had to choose.
Wow, you asked me that question cold. I'd have to think for a moment.
Yeah.
Naturally, I have a deep affinity for the college.
Okay.
I teach at the college.
Yeah.
So Healdsburg,
so some of those early sites. And I noticed that you featured Ellen White had at least, 2 homes there in Healdsburg, right?
She did, yeah. And also, I think St. Helena, which is right down the hill from Pacific Union College, because this was a place that was kind of a cauldron of creativity.
Wow.
When Merritt Cornell came through in the early 1870s and started the work there, he managed to sway to the faith a bunch of pioneers, also entrepreneurs. They were building a town. And so they became many of the people who were part of helping get the press started, helping get the college started, helping get the hospital started. And it was so marked that they actually didn't build a church for themselves right away until several years later, until they had already helped start the press and they'd helped start the hospital. And then they built themselves a church, and then they continued and helped start the college. So I really love St. Helena just because of that, the people that were there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So and by the way, do you ever do heritage tours of some of the stuff that's around here?
Pretty often, actually.
Yeah.
Our most common one is to the cemetery,
which might down in St. Helena.
Yes,
Yeah.
which might seem odd, but we have John Loughborough there.
Yeah.
All right, one of the very first evangelists to the state, and also spent half a century building the structures here, establishing churches as well as the conference, and so on. And just a whole lot of missionaries that perhaps went out from here, did their work around the globe, and they came back here to retire.
Yeah.
So just rambling through the cemetery on a Sabbath afternoon, we do that often. And hopefully tantalize students and visitors with stories.
Hey, my kids, if you hear Dr. Jim talking, so you should know that you're not the only ones that have had to go to lots of cemeteries.
Yes, I think mostly my kids have opted out, except for one of them. But
Yes, I understand. So down the hill, you've got some really cool stuff. I mean, it's hard to choose. It's like choosing who's your favorite child, right? I mean, it is. There's just a lot of really interesting, fun stuff. What did you, in the course of researching this book, discover that surprised you, that you didn't know, that you're like, man, I'm just so excited. This changed how I understood Adventist history by finding these physical sites. These are historical sites and locations. There's something about space, right? So when you not just talk about it, but you actually go and find the grave of Loughborough, or you go and find one of Ellen White's homes. How does space change our view of history?
Yeah, that's an interesting one to ponder, and my mind goes multiple directions at once. Part of it is just that it creates a sense of the real. These are distant figures. Wandering through the past, perhaps dragons are circling over. It almost seems mythical. Sometimes.
Right.
But then you go and you stand in front of their house, and you see, in the case of Merritt Kellogg, some of the carpentry that he did. That's just right there. I think there's that. Walking through Healdsburg and seeing where the college was and where the dormitory was and where the various faculty members lived, and Ellen White in particular, when the college opened, she bought a house in town. And part of her purpose was to, yes, be present with the students, but also to board some of the students, to offer all the support that she could. And so I think being able to walk the space and just seeing how close some things are together, it gives you a sense of the community, if you will, the community that builds up around it. The same in St. Helena. The same down in Oakland.
Sure.
You have the location of the Pacific Press, and then you hunt down the houses of the people who lived there. And they're just all around the corner from each other.
They are.
This is a community that did something extraordinary together.
Interesting.
In each of these places, whether it's St. Helena or Healdsburg or Oakland or Santa Rosa. It's all kind of stuck together. They're having chance meetings on street corners that change the world.
So it helps maybe bring the past to life.
Yeah, it does.
And it's amazing. And even Ellen White, I love, a few years ago, we were out sleuthing in a basement and found some financial records of Ellen White. I'll never forget that. And there she was using some of her extra money to help sponsor students at the school, and that just shows you, I think there's a genuineness and authenticity, whatever you think about her in any other dimension, that says a lot about somebody's character, but you wouldn't ever know that if you don't actually take the time to discover those spaces, hidden spaces, maybe.
Yeah. Another dimension, I'm just thinking as you're talking here, another dimension is the messiness of it all.
Messy history.
Yeah. And I'm not endorsing anything off the beaten path.
Well, what do you mean by that? Yeah.
Well, one of the founders of St. Helena Adventism that was heavily involved in the structures of the church was John Mavety. Probably a name that our listeners have never heard before.
Yeah, tell us about him.
But he was one who signed the charter document for the St. Helena Seventh-day Adventist Church, one of the founding
early
members.
Churches.
Also for the hospital, St. Helena Hospital.
Sure.
He was involved in the college. He was at a number of the denominational meetings. You see his name often. He's proposing motions and so on.
Yeah.
He was also the president of the local Wine Growers Association.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Apparently God can use anyone.
I guess so. And again, I'm not pushing an agenda with that. I'm just saying, wow, this was a little bit messier than I thought.
Okay.
Maybe a lighter version of this is I found a newspaper report of Merritt Kellogg, the original Adventist pioneer, at a dance down in Pope Valley.
Okay.
Just on the backside of the hill here. And the buildings are still there. The old buildings, kind of cool.
Interesting.
But just the realization that they were involved in their community in ways that don't fit the tighter narrative that I was, given earlier in life.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's like the early pioneers. Maybe they weren't all perfect saints.
Yes.
Maybe that there were some warts in there.
I think
that's
so.
what I'm hearing.
Differences in perspectives.
Differences. So they saw things, or maybe, and I think that's a part of history too, right? Like we don't always talk about William Miller. He liked to smoke his tobacco while he was studying Daniel and Revelation, or that he was a hog farmer. You know, these are the things that we don't necessarily talk about. But did God use him? Absolutely. You know, but the health message, that was kind of something beyond his time and his realm of understanding. But we can appreciate the best of what they contributed, right?
Sure. And I think that's a good place to take that. But understanding some of that texture, it humanizes them too.
It does, right?
They were on a journey. They were still growing.
And to make it practical, because I know you're a pastor too, right? As well as a professor, if God could use them with all their warts and foibles and problems, then maybe God can still use people today, despite our challenges, if we're really honest about ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent pastoral lesson. Thank you.
All right. Well, I since you're a teacher of pastors, I figure we had to go there a little bit. So, so tell me some more. If I wanted to come to the West Coast and find these Adventist heritage sites, I notice you have some in Southern California. You have some here in Northern California. What should I be thinking about here?
You should start in Northern California because that's where it started.
All right.
Merritt
Kellogg, start where it started.
Yes. Merritt Kellogg landed in the Bay Area, San Francisco particularly. And then the first official evangelists were just over the bay in Petaluma. And they just kind of geographically moved from there. They went a little bit north and around and eventually, migrated towards Southern California.
All right. Hey, Matthew, Lucio, I hope you're taking notes for an idea for a future Adventist Heritage Tour. So,
indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, you need the West Coast version.
West Coast of it.
I know you're thinking of it. So.
So start up here.
Yeah, I think
because that's where we are right now at Pacific Union College.
And one of the advantages here is that this is a sequential story.
Sure.
Some of the other locations around the country, we can have different eras where things kind of developed. But this was really a vibrant, enthusiastic development from a place that spread geographically to surrounding spaces. So it's pretty easy to follow in their footsteps.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I like it. So, all right. So we've talked about a lot of Northern California sites. What's there to see in Southern California?
Yeah, Southern California, it ends up at the end of my book because this is the first 50 years. And the majority was happening up here. But there are some fascinating things in Southern California and also in subsequent decades that are worth exploring. Naturally, the big one is the medical empire. If I can use that term.
After the 1901 GC, after we lose Battle Creek Sanitarium, there's kind of a reforging of Adventist healthcare again, right?
Yeah. And the interesting dynamic at play is that Ellen White has come back from Australia in 1900.
Yeah.
She rattles the cage at the 1901 General Conference session.
And rattle she did.
Calling for that reorganization. And yes, John Harvey Kellogg he's kind of on the outside. After that, in Southern California, the area had been settled and kind of abandoned and resettled and kind of abandoned because there was an issue with water.
It still is.
Yes, there is. And so in the early 1900s, Ellen White and John Burden, who was a minister, he had been working up here at St. Helena Sanitarium as well.
Okay, so early church worker.
Yes, they were working together. He was an extraordinary administrator as well. Not all pastors are. They have other skills, but he was.
I've heard rumors of such.
And so she and he and a few others were working together to identify some of the extraordinarily beautiful buildings that were built during the booms. And then you had the receding population waves. And they were sitting there in the desert, pristine buildings that you could get for a song and a dance.
Yeah.
Maybe not a dance because this is an Adventist group, but for a very small amount of money. And the difficulty was that the General Conference was trying to spend money more carefully at the time. So there was a no debt policy.
Sure.
Which
is fair. I mean, you can't spend money like it's no tomorrow, so I get it.
Yeah. And so we can understand where they were coming from, but Ellen White was coming from somewhere else.
Sure.
She was a pioneer through and through. And I think this is part of why Ellen White settled in California for much of her ministry.
Yeah.
She spent a lot of it here, and
Yeah.
that was because it was pioneering, and she was a pioneer.
Yeah.
So she's pioneering again, and
Love
she's
it.
arranging to find money here and there. She's funding some of it herself, and they buy these various facilities. And some of that,
She put some of her own personal money into it too, right? I mean, like
She
she's not like, hey, you go spend your money.
No, she probably spent all the money she had and then found the
and
rest.
then more.
Yeah. So anyway, this is it's her initiation out.
Yeah.
You know the story, and you can.
But
chime
our
in as
listeners
you
need to
wish.
hear the story because they need to get your book.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's called "Walking with the Pioneers."
Yes.
Captivating story of West Coast Adventism.
Yes. So you have these different medical health institutions in Southern California, and some historic sites to still see down that way to this day, right?
You do, and there were other.
So finish
interesting-
there.
Okay. Yes, I
Right.
think so.
Yeah.
If you're on a tour, you
Start in Northern California, work your way down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So I have a question.
Okay.
Any sites on the West Coast you just didn't have time to include in your book that if you did a part two,
Oh yeah.
too many?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Too many.
Too many. So there's a lot more to be done. Like, I mean, we could have a whole series of these books all across North America and different parts of the world, really, right? Yeah. Okay.
I had to stop somewhere.
Okay.
And,
Fair enough.
so
I mean,
it's-
I'm not trying to give you a hard time.
No,
Just-
this is the first 50 years, but even within the first 50 years, there's
Yeah,
a place
you're
in the book where I'm
delimiting.
like, at this point, it spread so rapidly that we just can't keep up.
Can't get
with
it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's certainly more.
So a lot of sleuthing. Now, this should not surprise anyone. Dr. Wibberding, teacher of the course on women in Adventist history, that there are a lot of women featured in this book.
Yes, there are.
How has that impacted these historic sites? What are some of the significant women whose stories are in your book?
Yeah, okay. So in Southern California, in particular, you were there, so let's go there first. You have this young woman, she's about 20 years old. Her name is Lula Joseph. And she
Great
just
story.
decides to go door to door in Riverside.
Okay.
So thinking of those centers where Adventist medical centers, okay, Riverside is one of those locations
Sure.
that's key.
Yeah.
And she just goes door to door because she wants to share her faith, and she develops a group.
Yeah.
Basically, a beginnings of a church plant.
Yeah.
Then later she goes to Hillsburg College, and she gets some training, and she's doing some Bible work, and her mother encourages her to go back and get her ministerial degree.
Sure.
So she does.
Yeah.
And then she goes and pastors a few different places, but ends back in Riverside, and she revives the group she had started. And ultimately, her employment history is it's a challenge because she was employed as a pastor, was successful as a pastor, as an evangelist, but the budgets were tight then too.
Yeah.
And so at various times she would get dropped from salary because a man who had a household to take care of needed that salary more.
Have mercy.
Can you continue to minister, but on your own dime kind of thing?
Wow.
So eventually she moved to Southern California, and she just built a house big enough to have a church, and that's
So she's very mission-minded.
that was part of her story.
Yeah.
Yeah. You also have Addie Morrison. She and her husband, Isaac Morrison was probably not as good as his wife was.
Okay.
And I found a letter where he was actually writing to Ellen White and recounting some of the conversations he had had with church leaders where they said just that we're not sure about your future, but hers for sure, right? And so...
we'll get one, but if we have to, I guess we'll take the other one.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing, and I don't know what to make of this, is that
All right.
she died kind of young, and in
Okay.
her obituary it says she was an ordained Adventist minister.
Really, in her obituary.
Eddie Morrison.
Interesting.
Yeah, in the newspaper. So that's newspaper. So we don't have a lot of documentation on that.
We
but it's
don't, but
intriguing.
but it seems like it was less of an issue. It was just like, women did ministry, and it was in early Adventism, a more talk about the progressiveness, right? That this was something that we empowered women to be church leaders, to be pastors, evangelists, and we've kind of, I hate to say it, but we've kind of forgotten these stories.
Yeah. You have the Healys, William Healy.
Another good example.
Clara Healy.
Yeah.
Both ministers, both evangelists, very effective.
Amazing.
They started a church in San Diego, which was led by women for the first 10 years.
Yeah.
Probably
amazing.
Clara's imprint.
Somewhere, huh? Yeah. Amazing. By the way, shout out to Heidi Olson Campbell. New podcast launched this month. They also served Sister Podcast, amazing resource for more stories about women in Adventist history. So there's a lot of women in this book. I noticed that's a strong theme. You mentioned archives, finding stuff. Tell me where you were looking to find stuff, Jim, because this is part of the work of a historian, isn't just writing the book, but there's a lot of super sleuthing. And I know you. I know looking at this book, there's a lot of footnotes or endnotes, so I know you spent a lot of time digging stuff up. Where did you go digging?
Yeah, well, there's the obvious. There are the obvious sources, the online archives, which are proliferating, and appreciate everybody who has put those online, because there's a lot there.
That helps. So like Adventist Digital Library, the General Conference Archive. So shout out to all of those digitization efforts, right?
Yes. So I love that. But the exciting thing, the more exciting thing is when you can hold those documents in your own hands.
Ooh.
So the archives here at Pacific Union
You
College,
do have some good archives here.
some rich archives.
Thank you, Eric Anderson.
Yes. And Katie
And
Van
others
Arsdale
who have
Bell
made that
and
happen. Katie, if
Patrick.
you're listening, thank you.
Patrick Benner, so, and the list could go on.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
There is something about discovering
Just
physical
going into an
documents.
archive and finding the original letter, right, or the original source, and you were doing that.
Yes. St. Helena Hospital.
Yeah.
You and I
Down
explored
in the
that
basement,
together. Yes. just a closet where they've carefully stored everything.
Exactly.
But it's so
It's
rich.
there.
It's exciting, and you make discoveries. And the fun thing about this is, I think it was good that it took me 2.5 years to write the book.
Yeah.
Because you discover a little piece here, a name or a connection, and it's rattling around upstairs. You make a note of it, and then over in some other archive, you're looking for something else, and you make another connection.
You stumble on something.
You weren't even sure what to look for, but you stumble on it. That's the exciting Indiana Jones sort of
I love it. We need to
process.
get you a hat, Jim.
Probably, We'll look into that.
All right. Sounds good. So one more thing I think is really fun. I think for our listeners, I noticed on the cover of your book some color pictures of these pioneers. Talk to me about what you've been. This is kind of like a creative art form. So tell me what you're doing and how you're bringing some of these pictures of pioneers back to life, almost bringing them into kind of color. So. You're obviously having some fun with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't take credit for the specific pictures on the front of the book.
Yeah.
Someone at Pacific Press did that, and they did a good job. But I find it interesting. AI is everyone has a strong opinion on AI.
Yeah, some for it, against it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's another tool.
Okay.
Just like Photoshop.
So this book's not written by AI.
It's not. That would have been faster, but no, not at all.
Some things still need to be done with some human intelligence, right?
Absolutely.
But there's also a role for AI, and here you are using some creative usages in doing that, right?
Yeah, a couple of things. So there's an AI process that reads the face of an old image and creates new images in full color. Vibrant,
what they would have looked like,
lively, and it's a way to recapture an aspect that the black and white photographs have lost.
So it's almost like kind of reimagining what would this person actually look like if I met them, maybe. Okay.
So my approach to that is I like both. I like to see the original photograph with all the scratches and all of those
tells a
textures.
story.
That tells a story, but also to realize these are real people who lived in full color.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, the quirkier thing, maybe I shouldn't even mention this.
No,
the
do
quirkier
it.
thing
Do
that
it. Bring it on, Jim.
Do with AI is I've been writing songs about West Coast Adventist pioneers.
This is so funny. I've been rolling on the floor laughing with some of the ones that you sent me.
Wait, they weren't supposed to be funny.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No.
Serious face now. Okay.
Yeah, no, I've had fun with that.
Yeah.
So, I write the lyrics, and then I put them through an AI app that generates
makes music and stuff. Yeah.
And so another way to bring things to life, and also for my students with whom I share some of this.
I bet they love that.
They tend to, and they remember the stories. They remember the details that way.
Fair enough.
So.
Yeah. Love it. All right, so... unfortunately, our time is wrapping up rapidly here, but where can one purchase your book?
Well, it should be on the online outlets here very soon.
So through Pacific Press.
Pacific Press is the publisher.
AdventistBookCenter.com. I assume it'll be on Amazon in due course, Kindle, all of those kinds of places.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll drop that in the show notes so people can be some of the first to pick up your book. So you heard it first at Adventist Pilgrimage Podcast. Any final thoughts?
Well, I just hope that they thoroughly enjoy the journey. This really is part of the story that is very central to the story, and it is part of the story that most people haven't heard.
And you've heard it from Dr. Jim Wibberding, Walking with the Pioneers, the captivating story of West Coast Adventism, 1859 to 1909. We encourage our listeners pick up a copy or get a electronic version, whichever way. Get a copy of this book. Don't walk, run. And this will be a great resource if you're ever on the West Coast or you live on the West Coast. This will help you. And even if you're not, it will still help you orient you to a very important part of our Adventist story. Thanks for joining us at the Adventist Pilgrimage Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Campbell. We've been talking with Dr. Jim Wibberding. Until next time, keep researching, keep studying our Adventist past as we searched how to bring the past to life.
And Jesus himself said that he did not come to do away with the law.
He will not take us out of this world if he does not want us to be contaminated